Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face-Off XL, where I'm getting a real sense of deja vu in February of 1995, and repeating on me are Amiga Format, CD32 Gamer, Amiga Power, CU Amiga, Amiga Action, and the One For Amiga. Fight! Amiga Action starts us off today, and across its 2 discs we have 2 demos and 3 PD games. And wait, I know this one, starts right away as we have Base Jumpers. This is a bit of an odd hybrid game, as first we have to make our way up to the top of this building in this platforming section, that feels very slippery and jittery. This is a different level to what we played just 3 years ago? Yikes! Where does the time go? As we'll find these switches that need to be pressed to open up parts of the map. And you'll also have to press them pretty quickly, as the whole screen is moving up all the time, pushing you upwards. You'll also have to deal with security guards and other traps, which for the most part I think you can just jump on? But because how quickly everything happens and how jittery everything is, I'm never quite sure what it is I've just done. But eventually, you will make it to the top. And that's when the real namesake of this game comes into play, as you have to jump off the building. And your main goal is to not die, as you can be taken out by flagpoles and other obstacles, but you can bash each other into them as well. And really, your main goal is to try and survive long enough that you can be the last one to open up your chute. As really, you want to be the first one to hit the ground. And survive. The second demo is for ATR, All Terrain Racing, that shows us 3 maps, but it only allows you to select one of them. It also shows you 3 cars, but you can only pick one of them. But it does let you customize your car and buy various items, and then it's on to the race. And this is a top-down racer with a decently sized track, and you are against quite a few other players. The whole thing moves fast enough and looks quite nice. And again, this is a different track to what we've seen previously. And it turns out this is actually the first main track of the final game. And it features a few hazards like jumps and water, as well as the track weaving across itself a few times. Now there does seem to be a few items that you can collect, but I'm not sure what any of them really do, well outside of the money and the booster. Now imagine my surprise when I worked out there's actually more than one track in this demo, and I just had to come first to see the next one, which was a bit of a challenge. Now there might be more than 2, but I couldn't get first in the second track, so who knows. Now all in all, this is a decent enough racing game, and I can imagine with the upgrade system, it would be a lot of fun to play the full thing. The second disc is full of its PD, and we start with Gorf, which is a remake of Gorf. Where they skimped on the creativity on the name, they put into the main spaceship, as it's almost double the size of the arcade original, which makes this much harder to play. And if you've not heard of Gorf before, it's a bit of a mashup game, as you start off with a Space Invaders style level, before you move on to the laser attack mode, where groups of ships will attack you, and if you break them up, then they'll start to attack you individually. Then it moves on to a Galaxian style, and a space warp, and then you have a mothership to take out. It's an odd arcade game, and it's an equally odd PD title. But it is fun, if a little bit harder due to the size of the spaceship, as it will make it much easier for you to get hit by those enemies. The second PD title is Air Ace 2, a shoot 'em up construction kit game, but one that has been very well done, as there's lots of tile graphics and things to shoot at, and a few creative paths for the enemies to follow. but like all Suke games, it is let down by the poor frame rate, no upgrades, and limited sounds and music. But this might be one of the better examples of a game made using that game maker. And finally, there is Squamble, an obvious remake of Scramble, where you are that huge ship in this auto-scrolling world that will require you to avoid the ground and other obstacles, all while shooting at the various things, as you have a front-facing gun and bombs. And outside of just clearing a path for you, you will also need to hit the fuel icons, as you only have a limited amount that is slowly ticking down. And after you get through the first few levels, you'll start to deal with the caverns, and that's where things will get much harder. That is, if you manage to avoid the missiles in the previous rounds. This is a fun, if basic looking game, and one you should check out if you quite like the arcade. It's CU Amiga up next, that had a full free program and a single demo. But what a full program it was, because we get Directory Opus 4. The legendary file browser alternative is here and it's free. And it's this version that I see included on all sorts of Amiga packs and pre-made OS images. It's also what I use on my Amigas as well. And if you have no idea what this is, then think of it as an alternative to Workbench. As when you're working with files, you'll have these two columns, and each one can point to a different folder on your computer. Now this makes moving files around so much easier, or just to browse in general. But then you also have this palette of buttons at the bottom. Now these can also be customized to your liking. Now I tend to leave most of it on its basics, but I do like to have the Arc Extract button, which makes it much easier to unpack those LHA files from various sites. And being honest, that is one of my main uses of Dopus. Now it does have a few other interesting things built in as well, like being able to view text files or even images, which is useful as if we look at the disk we'll also find some additional clip art for Comic Setter, which was a program that CU Amiga provided just the month before. I might not live in Dopus like quite a few other Amiga owners, but I do like to go in and use it when I'm moving lots of files around, as it does tend to be a little bit more stable at doing large file transfers, at least compared to some of the older versions of Workbench. And their demo is for Crystal Dragon, which in keeping for CU Amiga is an RPG. Now this is the first time I'm playing this one, and the first thing that I had to do was pick from quite a range of characters, with the most stereotyped music playing in the background. Now this must have been based on a near finished version of the game, as it's not often that you'll get to pick a difficulty level in a demo. And then the game is presented in the 3D style view that had become typical for dungeon crawlers. And right away we have to solve a puzzle to open the door. Now I'm not sure if there was any real hints around me other than the "only the wise can enter" to try and solve how to open it, but after a little bit I was able to brute force my way through and work out what the code is. And I did wonder if I made a mistake after I went through the door, as it just plunged you into darkness. And it then took me way too long to work out that one of those torches that are in your inventory you can put in your hand and it will light the place up. Now walking around is easy enough with the arrows on the UI, but I do find it quite funny that it will allow you to keep walking into a wall and hurt yourself. It's also a little annoying, as I'm not always sure if I'm right up against the wall or not, until it goes "ugh" as you hit it. Combat seems straightforward enough. You just keep hitting the button and it'll swing the sword. And this seems like a decently sized demo for a complex and interesting game, and I feel I'm barely scratching the surface of it so far, so this might have to be one that I will return to later. Spinning up next is CD32 Gamer, that put that CD to good use, as they provided 5 demos, a few slideshows, and the typical array of scene demos and PD games. And jumping in with the demos, we find Disposable Hero, or at least we would if the demo loaded. I've tried my copy and various other images that I found on the internet, and all of them returned this messed up screen. So at this point I can only assume it was broken from the source. So let's move on to Nigel Mansell's World Championship, a game that we have seen before on the A500. So I am spotting the odd change here and there. The track I think looks more detailed, with a gradient going on in the road, and the background's looking more colourful, with more gradients going on in it as well, with there being more stuff going on at the edges of the tracks, and with obviously an overall faster and smoother feeling to the movement. I'm guessing this is mostly the AGA version put on a CD, but I've not played that version so I can't confirm. Now overall this game feels like a middle ground between the more serious racing games and the more arcadey style ones, and overall it feels fun and decent to play, if a little short, as it's only a few laps on this single track and that's it, so it's all over in just a few minutes, with just trying to get first in that small amount of time being the only real reason to return. We get another demo from Gremlin, as they seem to be the main provider of demos this month, and it is Zool, that opens up with the CG intro. But the demo is still for the first level of the game, a level that we've played in many demos many times before. And it is still just a single level demo, but this time it is based on the AGA version, so we get that lovely confusing background. And as this is a Euro platformer, we have to collect 99 items to unlock the exit. And if you make it, then you get to watch another 3D rendered sequence to finish it off. Still a fun game, but it is a very basic demo. And Gremlin round us out with Heroes Quest 2, Legacy of Sorasil. Now this opens up with a bit of an intro and the title screen, and feels far more complete than the previous time we played this demo. But it does still seem to be a single level that you play, and it's the exact same one that we played before. Now control wise we have both joypad and mouse support, which is nice. Though the mouse controls feel a little bit broken, so you will still require to use the pad to do anything in the game. Now we can move our two heroes around this map, finding monsters and attacking them as we move towards a castle. Now you'll get to move each character in turn, where you'll have a limited number of action time that you can use up. That walking will also use up it, as well as a set number of steps that you can take. And after each character has finished, it's time to give the enemy a chance as well. This is all following the Hero Quest rules, or at least I assume so, as I've never actually played the board game. And this game looks like it's based on the original OCS Amiga version, as there is no AGA release. I do think there is some extra new sound effects, or at least I don't recall them in the last demo, and I've not played the full thing, so I don't think it's really using the power of the CD or the CD32. At least for this demo. I hear for the full release they actually managed to put some CD music on it. And the final demo is for Emerald Mines, a game that doesn't look to be pushing the CD32 either. And to be honest, I'm not sure it really would have pushed the C64. But graphics aren't everything, it's about gameplay. And in that regard, we find a Boulder Dash style game, where you have to collect various emeralds while trying to avoid the boulders that can fall on you and crush you. But there are also other things in the levels that will try and get you as well. but if you can time those falling blocks, then you can use them to your advantage to take them out instead. And some of them might even hide items like keys that you'll need to continue. Now, as far as I can tell, this seems to be a combination of the previously released Emerald Mine games that were released on the Amiga way back in the late 80s, which does go a long way to explaining its looks. It also explains why this is actually fully playable on the CD Now, this was never my kind of game, but the large number of levels that it has in the demo is quite cool, so I could see me putting some time into it. One nice oddity is that there's a slideshow for the hidden second game, The Big End. For the longest time, it was these images, mostly seen in the magazines, that showed off the game's anime art style, and what it also shows that this was meant to be a top-down racer. Now, we did eventually get to see a leaked demo, but this is pretty much all we got to see from the team that had brought us Donk the Samurai Duck. And finally, there is a rolling demo for Akira, that starts off with a nicely done version of the intro to the movie, and then goes on to show the gameplay. Which I'm sure was enough to turn away a lot of people, as this wasn't a great game, and to be honest, I think this rolling demo does show off how bad it is. So let's move on to one of the more interesting parts of these CDs, the PD selection. The first game is Nostralagum. That starts off with some nicely done screens, and then when it starts, it turns out to be a Uridium style shooter. Now, it's hard to say if this was released before or after Uridium 2, but I think it might have been after, but I have no dates to confirm this. But overall, this is very well done, and it moves really nicely. Now, I'm not any good at it, but I think that was to be expected really. But it was good fun to rush around the ship, taking out the various things on the decks, as well as the baddies that were flying around. It's just a shame that it doesn't seem to be fully compatible with the CD32, as the graphics get a little bit messed up on the HUD at the top. Now, another PD game that I've not seen before is Parachute Joust, a silly game with a nice intro, that has you flying to the ground and having to fight with the other player to get the parachute. Now, every so often there'll be cloud banks that will obscure your view, but overall it is good fun, if a little basic. It's also surprisingly slow at times, but overall I can't complain too much, as I did enjoy playing it. The shareware game that I wanted to show off was Hot Blocks, which sounds more like a drug thing than a take on Tetris, but that is what it is, and one that isn't going to be a straight clone either, as it was built with multiplayer in mind, even if you do want to play it single player. The first thing that I noticed when I started the level mode was how the pieces moved, as they've gone with this smooth movement system, and it feels really odd. It somehow made it feel less precise than the jump move that most other games have, because I actually managed to get some bits into the wrong position because it just seemed to move weirdly. You do get used to it after a while, but it doesn't feel great to start with. It's also slightly annoying that when you press down, it does move quicker, but not as quick as you might want, or do an instant drop, but again, you get used to that after a while as well. But the more interesting thing is how the levels work, as it's completely different, as you'll be given a target, like clear 4 single lines, and when that happens, it will then clear the well, and you'll start the next one with a new layout, which will also have its own new set of rules. Now, annoyingly, if you're given a target, it doesn't tick down when you complete parts of it, so you'll have to remember or guess at how many lines you still need to clear. And after a while, you might even get into a situation where you have a timer that will reset every time you get a line. So you have to be very quick and keep trying to hit lines, rather than trying to build up larger groups. On top of that, you also have lives, and it will reset the well each time you die, which is quite handy. There are also these special blocks that will do something if you manage to complete a line using them, or they'll just become a regular square block otherwise. Now it's a bit easier to show in the hot blocks mode, that will only give you square blocks as well as the special ones, and those might give you extra points, reverse your controls, destroy random parts, or just remove all the colour. Now this is a very interesting game and a great take on Tetris. And for this month's animation, I've gone with Windy Bottom. Moving on, we have Amiga Format, that had an application demo, 2 game demos, as well as a PD title. And the program demo is for Data Store, a database program similar to Access, which in itself might have become a bit of a dated reference, as you can design the page and then the data that you'll want to fill in it. Now, Amiga Format have provided some examples in the way of their game reviews over the past few years, which is actually really cool. And because it's a database, we can do searches on it, like finding a game, or if we wanted to find more content for Yesterzine's 73% trials, then we could look that up as well. But being a demo, this is limited. But amazingly, you can actually save anything that you make. It will be limited just to the first 10 entries though. The first demo is for Cannon Fodder 2, that they've called a Not a Very Festive Fodder. This is a 4-level demo, based on maps from the full game. And these aren't ones that are going to ease you in either, they will challenge you right away. Which, to be honest, is very indicative of the final game, as wow, that was not the easiest of games to play. It will also show you what you'll come to expect from the different worlds, as we also get to try out those alien levels as well. But even with a new coat of paint, it's still mostly the same cannon fodder that we've seen before, just with the difficulty ramped right up, as well as those purple levels to deal with. If you don't know cannon fodder, then you have to use your group of soldiers to take on missions, that normally you'd be told your objectives before you even start, but in the demo, well, it just drops you right in and expects you to work it out. So I think this is just one of those basic ones where you have to take out all the enemies as well as all the buildings. Structures will require you using explosives, either the grenades or the missiles, to take out, and this is a very fun and tactical game, and it will require you splitting up your squads and having to rush some sites. It's such a great game, but to be honest, Cannon Fodder 2 might just be a little bit too challenging for most people. The other demo was for Overlord, a World War II flight sim game based around Operation Overlord. There you can just let it run the demo on its own, and it will show you the various objectives that you'll have to deal with in the full game, as well as a bit of history on the battle itself, and it all runs in lovely 3D that runs quite nicely on an A1200. And to be honest, this will probably be the best part of this section of the video. Or you can go try playing the game itself, and then you'll get to see me flying a Spitfire, trying to take out enemy aircraft and doing other things as well. Or at least what I think is the enemy. Because this is set during World War II, and you're not going to get much in the way of heads-up displays or targeting graphics telling you who is who. Just a radio report letting you know where the enemy are, and then it's up to you to try and find them. Now, long-time viewers will know I'm not great at these types of games, but it's still fun to fly around and try and shoot things down, even if I don't manage it most of the time and end up crashing into the sea. The final item for Amiga Format is the PD game Gunfighters. Now this is a simple 2-player game where you have to draw your gun before the other person when you hear the sound. The graphics are all this pre-rendered style, even if it is with a low range of colours. And that is pretty much it for that shareware style demo. Now if this combination of demos and PD sounds familiar, then Amiga Power gave away this exact same set of games in January of 1995. The Gunfighters demo that I just played even said Amiga Power when it starts. The only real difference for Cannon Fodder 2 is the levels. So let's move on to Amiga Power. That had 2 demos this month, and this was actually the magazine that I bought back in the 90s. And the first demo that I played was Super Skid Marks. Now this is a special demo that lets you drive around as a cow. And even with this ability, I'm still mostly last when I play, in this isometric style racing game. And while it is just a single track and vehicle that you can play as, you can reverse it if you want to add a bit of spice. You can even add more players, as this does support quite a few. And if you really wanted to mess around with that handling of the cow, then you can add a caravan that you'll drag behind you, to make things really difficult. It's a fun, silly demo, and that is before you spot the Pong style game that you can play on the main menu. The second demo is for Shadow Fighter, an amazing beat 'em up for the Amiga, and this demo shows why it's so well regarded. Even if it is like most demos for this type of game, you just have 2 characters and 1 stage, but you do get single and multiplayer options. But just look at that stage background, it looks lovely, and this is running on an Amiga 500 with 1 MB of RAM. So at this point, that's 7-year-old hardware, and the basic Amiga chipset is almost 10 years old at this point. So it really shows how advanced the Amiga was when it came out. But this isn't only just a looker, it runs great as well, with decently sized sprites moving quickly with a good number of animations and moves going on as well. Not that I'm all that good against the AI, it really isn't giving me much of a chance here at all, is it? The final magazine of the month is the One For Amiga, that also had 2 demos, and its first one was also for Shadow Fighter. But we do get to see a different level as well as a new character, as one of them had to be switched out, because they had to keep at least one of the lovely ladies in the demo, didn't they? Now interestingly, it does have a few differences with its main menu versus the previous one. But outside of that, it's still great. And amazingly, I think they toned the AI down in this one as I managed to beat it. The final demo for the month is Marvin's Marvelous Adventure. A platformer with the tiny pizza delivery guy is back. In this demo we do have a decent number of levels to play, some of which I've not seen before. And this is mostly your typical Mario style platformer. You jump around, you hit blocks, you pick up items, and you land on heads. You can also kick things, including the trees, to get more items. And you might even get the odd ride on a creature. but I was surprised to see a boss fight in the demo as well, where you had to get cannonballs into the cannon and then fire it at that angry looking hammer. This is a fun game that was only released on the AGA machines, and we've checked it out previously. And with that, we have checked out all the content for this month, so it's time to rate the top 3 items that I want to play around with more. And in third place, I'm gonna say Hot Blocks. It was a fun take on Tetris, and I could see me putting a decent amount of time into it, as it had all those modes and some interesting ideas. In second place, it had to be Directory Opus 4, if just because it's this version that I've been using all these years. And I get the feeling that many of the Amiga owners out there have been using this version as well. And in first place, Crystal Dragon. Now, it's not typically my type of game, but it did look quite interesting and a fun take on the dungeon crawler genre, and I could have seen me putting a lot of time into this back in the day. So with that, we've come to the end of the month, and as always, let me know in the comments what you thought on this slightly drier February, and what you thought of my rankings. And until next time, I've been the Goldfish. That was a lot of content that we've seen before, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching. I do enjoy making these episodes, even if every so often we cover the same games, as I do end up finding new titles that I've not played before. And if all of this sounds interesting, then you might want to like and subscribe to the channel, as I put out new content all the time. Or you could check out some of the other content that I've done, as you'll find 2 options on the screen right now.